Camera pans across the sleek, shiny cars lined up in front of a luxury dealership. The sun is shining brightly over the Scottsdale, Arizona skyline. The camera slowly zooms in on a modest SUV pulling into the parking lot of Prestige Motors. In the heart of sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, sits a dealership that has built its name on selling luxury vehicles, Prestige Motors. The kind of place where the rich and powerful walk through the doors, their expensive suits and ties speaking volumes before they even say a word. The SUV parks in an unmarked spot at the back of the lot, the faint hum of the air conditioning kicking in as the door opens. A man steps out, a stark contrast to the high-end environment surrounding him. But today things are about to change. The man stepping out of that SUV is Darrell Carter, the new owner of Prestige Motors. And on this day, dressed casually in a simple gray hoodie, faded jeans, and sneakers, Darrell isn't here to be noticed. He's here for something much more important. Camera follows Darrell walking towards the dealership entrance, his gaze scanning the building. The glossy finishes of the luxury cars almost seem to shine brighter in the hot desert sun. Darrell isn't here to show off, to make a grand entrance, or to play the part of a typical car dealership owner. No, today Darrell is here to observe, to see exactly how the dealership operates when no one knows who's really in charge. He approaches the entrance, the door opening with a quiet ding. The camera cuts to a group of employees chatting casually inside. The camera follows Darrell as he enters the cool, air-conditioned showroom, the contrast between the desert heat outside and the luxury inside palpable. The scent of leather and fresh wax fills the air as the rows of pristine cars gleam under bright lights. A few employees chat near the front desk, their voices trailing off as Darrell steps in, drawing their attention. The atmosphere shifts subtly. Whispers seem to ripple through the group of staff. Inside, the air is cooler, more refined, and every corner of the showroom speaks of wealth. But here, in this pristine space, Darrell is just another customer. At least, that's what they think. The camera lingers on Darrell as he walks slowly through the showroom, his eyes taking in the luxurious vehicles, but also noting the looks exchanged between the employees. The subtle shift in energy is almost palpable, but Darrell doesn't react. Instead, he remains calm, steady. Camera focuses on Susan, a middle-aged woman with sharp features and an even sharper gaze. She's standing near the front desk, scanning the showroom when her eyes land on Darrell. Her posture shifts immediately as she walks toward him, the clicking of her polished heels echoing through the showroom. Susan, the dealership's manager, spots Darrell immediately. She's quick to assess, her eyes scanning his casual attire, the hoodie, the worn jeans. A sharp, calculating look crosses her face. This man doesn't belong here, or so she thinks. Susan approaches with a professional air, her voice cool as she speaks to Darrell. Susan, excuse me, can I help you with something? Darrell turns to face her, a calm smile on his face, his demeanor unflappable. Darrell, just here to look around. He gestures to the cars, a casual, nonchalant movement. Susan's eyes narrow slightly, scrutinizing him. She doesn't believe it. Something about him doesn't fit the typical customer profile of this high-end dealership. Susan, are you shopping for a car? Her voice carries a slight edge of doubt as she looks him over, not bothering to hide the judgment in her gaze. Darrell, smiling faintly. Something like that? Susan's lips press together, trying to maintain professionalism, though her discomfort is palpable. She glances around as if trying to decide the best way to handle this unexpected situation. Susan, well, we cater to a very specific clientele here. Most of our inventory requires pre-qualification, so perhaps I could recommend... Before she can finish, another employee calls out from across the showroom. Employee. Hey, Susan, the delivery guy is here. Susan's attention wavers momentarily, but she quickly snaps back to Darrell, clearly determined to maintain control of the situation. She glares at him for a second longer, her mind still trying to process his presence in the showroom. Susan, forcing a smile. I'm just trying to save you some time. These vehicles start at 6 figures. Maybe I can direct you to a dealership that specializes in pre-owned vehicles. Darrell's expression remains unchanged as he watches her, the brief tension in the air growing more noticeable. Susan assumes she's dealing with a man who doesn't belong in the world of luxury cars. But Darrell doesn't flinch. Instead, he quietly observes, watching as the pieces of the puzzle fall into place around him. The camera zooms in on Susan's face, her expression tightening as she watches Darrell. Her polite smile falters just slightly. Darrell, still standing casually, gives no sign of discomfort. His hands are in his pockets, his body language relaxed. But his mind is alert, noting every glance, every subtle shift in Susan's posture. The tension between them builds quietly, but it's unmistakable. Susan's assumptions have already begun to take shape. Her eyes have already decided. This man doesn't belong here. The hoodie, the sneakers, the way he carries himself. Everything about him screams out of place in a luxury dealership. And though she's trying to remain professional, it's clear that her judgment has already been passed. Susan's eyes narrow as she watches Darrell pretend to admire a sleek silver coupe. His fingers lightly brush against the door handle. It's an innocent gesture, but to her, it only reinforces the idea that he's out of his depth. Susan, tight smile. I see you're looking at the cars. They're beautiful, aren't they? Her voice is forced, not as warm as before. The polite surface is beginning to crack. Darrell glances back at her, nodding slightly, his demeanor calm as ever. Darrell, calmly. Yeah, they are. Nice design. He doesn't mention the price, doesn't react to her underlying tone. Susan, though, is already thinking ahead, ready to guide him to what she considers more realistic options. Susan, stepping closer. Well, as I said before, these cars are a significant investment. Most of our customers come well prepared, financially speaking. Have you checked with your bank to see if you're qualified for financing? Darrell raises an eyebrow, but his voice remains steady, unaffected by the underlying judgment. Darrell, you assuming I'm not qualified? Susan falters for just a moment, but quickly recovers. Her posture stiffens and she stands a little taller, as though bracing herself against the challenge. Susan, snapping slightly. I'm just trying to save you time. She gestures dismissively toward the high-end vehicles around them. Susan, these vehicles start at 6 figures. We typically cater to individuals who can easily afford such a purchase. If you're not sure about your finances, I can give you directions to a dealership that specializes in pre-owned models. Her words come out a little sharper now, her patience wearing thin. She's not just suggesting, she's implying, making it clear that she doesn't think Darrell has what it takes to buy a luxury car. Darrell, though, isn't rattled. He lets her words settle, but doesn't let the sting of her assumptions pass unnoticed. Susan's words sting more than she realizes, but Darrell remains composed, his calm demeanor only adding to the discomfort she's starting to feel. The subtle assumptions about his financial status, the assumptions about his worthiness, these are all things he's learned to ignore over the years. But it's clear that Susan, like so many before her, can't see past her surface-level judgments. Darrell's eyes flick over to the silver coupe again. He taps his finger lightly against the car door, a gesture that seems casual but is loaded with intent. He turns back to Susan with a calm expression, his voice level, but with just enough weight to make her pause. Darrell, that's quite the assumption you're making about me, don't you think? Susan stares at him, her face flushing slightly, caught off guard by his calm, direct tone. She stammers for a moment, but then quickly regains her professional mask, forcing another tight smile. Susan, tight-lipped. I'm just trying to be realistic with you. Darrell tilts his head slightly, his voice soft, but cutting through the tension like a knife. Darrell. Realistic? You mean based on what? How I look? The question hangs in the air, and for the first time, Susan hesitates. Her eyes flicker with a flash of uncertainty, but she quickly regains her composure and straightens up, unwilling to show weakness. Susan, almost defensive. I've been in this business a long time, and I can tell when someone's out of their depth. It's nothing personal, okay? The air in the showroom seems to grow thicker. Darrell watches her, his gaze steady. He's heard these lines before. He knows exactly what's happening here, but instead of retreating, he takes a step forward, his voice calm, but with a sharp edge that cuts through the tension. Darrell, I'm not sure if you understand what I'm saying. I'm not here for your assumptions. He lets that sink in for a moment, then adds a line that clearly takes Susan off guard. Darrell, why don't you let me speak to the owner? Think we can make that happen? Susan blinks, visibly taken aback. She hadn't expected that. Her polished confidence falters, and for the first time, the facade slips. She glances at Darrell, then quickly shifts her gaze around the showroom, as if hoping someone will step in. No one does. Susan, stammering. The owner? Darrell's voice remains calm, light, almost conversational. Darrell, yeah, the owner. I'd like to have a word with them. Susan hesitates, her eyes darting back to Darrell. She's caught off guard. The man she'd written off as out of place, unqualified, is now asking for the one person she had never imagined he could possibly be. Her hands shake slightly as she grips her clipboard tighter. Susan, forcing a smile, well, that's not possible today. The owner doesn't just drop by for casual visits. They're a busy person. Darrell raises an eyebrow, but his voice remains light, unaffected by her attempt to brush him off. Darrell, I'm sure they are. He shrugs nonchalantly, pulling out his phone and scrolling through his contacts, deliberately ignoring her shocked expression. Darrell, but maybe you could give them a call. Let them know I'm here. I think they'll want to meet me. Susan watches, stunned, as Darrell dials the number, the tension between them now so thick it's almost palpable. Employees have stopped talking, and the room is hanging on every moment. The sound of Darrell's phone call seems to echo around the showroom. The camera lingers on Susan's face as she watches Darrell take out his phone and dial. Her eyes flick from the phone to his calm, unfazed demeanor. The tension in the room is thick, and she stands frozen for a moment, her mind racing. Employees in the showroom watch intently, their attention drawn to the escalating situation. A few whisper under their breath, sensing something is about to shift. The hum of quiet conversation stops entirely. For Susan, it's a moment of realization. In the span of a few seconds, her entire perception of the man standing before her flips upside down. The man she assumed was out of place, the man she judged by his casual clothes and demeanor, is now making a call to someone she assumed was the owner of the dealership. But there's one thing she doesn't know, that someone he's calling is none other than himself. Darrell scrolls through his contacts with deliberate calmness, his fingers tapping the screen with precision. He lifts the phone to his ear and waits for the call to connect. The showroom falls into an eerie silence. Susan shifts from foot to foot, anxiety rising. A bead of sweat forms on her temple. She's trying to process the situation, but it's hard to reconcile the man standing before her with the powerful owner she's imagining on the other end of the phone line. Darrell, into the phone, casually. Yeah, it's me. I'm at the dealership now. Everything's fine, just a little misunderstanding. Could you let them know I'm here? The camera stays focused on Susan's face as she watches Darrell speak into the phone. She blinks, confused. Slowly, she starts piecing it together, but she's in denial. She tries to make sense of the situation, but nothing adds up. Susan, softly under her breath. What is he doing? Darrell hangs up the phone and slips it back into his pocket, casually turning to face Susan. He gives a small, almost playful smile as he looks at her. The entire showroom seems to hold its breath as the employees, who had previously been whispering and exchanging glances, now shift nervously in their spots. Darrell, lightly, they'll be here shortly. Susan opens her mouth, but no words come out. Her face has gone pale, and her posture is stiff with disbelief. She shifts her eyes from Darrell to the employees, whose eyes are now glued to her. A moment of uncomfortable silence passes, the room still as a statue. The weight of Darrell's calm response settles over the showroom like a thick fog. It's not just the words he's spoken, but the implications behind them. A call to the owner? That's something only a person with authority could do. But Darrell's posture, his demeanor, his lack of urgency, it all suggests something Susan has overlooked. And it's all becoming clear now. She has misjudged him, assumed too much, and now the truth is unfolding right before her eyes. Susan blinks rapidly, trying to process what's happening. She can't believe it. She's never been caught in a situation like this before. Her usual calm and composed persona is now replaced with uncertainty. The showroom feels alive with tension, as if everyone is holding their breath. Susan, voice trembling, Who did you just call? Darrell doesn't answer immediately. He looks around the showroom, his gaze sweeping over the staff, each one now aware of the situation. He meets Susan's gaze and smiles faintly, his voice soft but firm. Darrell, guess we'll find out. The silence is deafening. Minutes tick by, but it feels like hours. Finally, the sound of the front door opening breaks the stillness, and the camera zooms in on the sharp click of polished shoes on the tile floor. A sharply dressed man enters the showroom, a tall, well-groomed individual in a navy suit. His expression is serious, but his smile is warm and genuine. He looks directly at Darrell, man in suit, smiling warmly. "Mr. Carter, so good to see you." The tension in the showroom immediately shifts. The staff watches in stunned silence, unable to believe their eyes. Susan's mouth goes slack as she stares at the man who has just entered, the regional director of the dealership. She realizes too late that the person standing before her, the one she had so hastily dismissed, is in fact the new owner. Darrell, returning the handshake, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Thanks for coming, Alex. Appreciate it." The camera captures Susan's shock as her face turns ashen. She's visibly shaken, her clipboard slipping from her hands as she stumbles back a few steps, trying to make sense of what's happening. The reveal is like a bombshell, one that Susan never saw coming. The man she assumed wasn't qualified to even touch the vehicles in the showroom is not only in charge, but he is the one who now owns it all. Alex, the regional director, looks at Susan, his demeanor shifting from friendly to professional, almost curt. Alex to Susan. "Susan, I see you've already met Mr. Carter." Susan blinks rapidly, her face flushed with embarrassment as she fumbles for words, clearly rattled. Susan, stammering. I didn't realize." Alex looks over at Darrell, an apologetic glance in his direction before turning back to Susan. Alex, more firmly. "You didn't realize? He's the new owner of this dealership, Susan, and I'm sure this wasn't the welcome you intended to give him." The realization hits Susan fully. Her expression falters, and for a moment, she stands frozen, completely unsure of how to proceed. She looks back at Darrell, her voice barely above a whisper, as she stumbles through an apology. "Susan," softly. I'm so sorry." Darrell holds up a hand, his tone calm, but carrying an air of finality. Darrell, "It's all right, Susan. I think you and I just got off on the wrong foot." Susan takes a step back, her face flushed with shame. The camera pans around the showroom as the staff watches, a mixture of surprise, discomfort, and curiosity on their faces. The energy in the room has shifted dramatically. What was once a tense, awkward encounter has now transformed into a moment of reckoning. Darrell stands tall, unshaken, while Susan's shoulders slump in resignation. For Susan, the moment of truth has come. She misjudged the man standing before her, and in doing so, she's revealed something much deeper than just her assumptions. The culture of this dealership isn't about the cars on display, it's about the people, and the moment Darrell stepped through the door, he was already challenging that culture without saying a word. The camera opens on a sleek modern conference room with glass walls filled with tension. The sunlight pours in, casting reflections on the polished surfaces. The employees file in and take their seats, a sense of unease palpable in the air. Darrell stands at the head of the table, his posture confident but calm. He surveys the room, making eye contact with every employee as they take their seats. His presence commands attention, even as his demeanor remains unassuming. The showroom has gone quiet, but the true conversation is about to begin. Darrell has already shown them that appearances are deceiving, but now it's time to set the tone, to challenge the culture that exists in this dealership, and to make sure everyone here understands exactly what's at stake. The last employee takes a seat, and Darrell clears his throat, taking a moment to collect his thoughts. The room falls silent. Darrell, calmly, "Thank you all for joining me on such short notice." He looks around the room, his gaze steady as it rests on each employee, including Susan, who sits near the back, avoiding eye contact. Darrell, continuing. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Darrell Carter, and as of last month, I'm the new owner of Prestige Motors." There's a murmur of surprise from the employees, some exchanging glances with each other. A few are caught off guard, clearly processing the news for the first time. Darrell lets the words settle, watching their reactions closely. Darrell, nodding slightly. "I've been here a few times now, but today I came in a little differently, dressed casually, just like any regular customer might. Why? Because I wanted to see how this dealership operates when no one knows who I am. I wanted to see what a potential customer might feel when they walk through those doors. The employees shift uncomfortably in their seats, and Darrell's voice grows more measured, more serious. Darrell, and what I experienced today was disappointing. He pauses, giving the room time to absorb his words. He's not angry, but the weight of his tone tells them that this isn't something to brush off. Darrell, I was judged, not for what I could bring to the table, but for how I looked. It's not just about me. It's about what that says about the culture of this dealership. He lets the words sink in, allowing the quiet to stretch just long enough. Everyone is listening now. He can see it in their faces, some uncomfortable, some defensive, but all paying attention. It's one thing to observe from the outside, but it's another to bring it to the table. Darrell isn't here to sugarcoat the situation. He's here to make things clear and to demand better from his team. Because real change isn't about feeling good, it's about doing the hard work. Darrell looks at Susan, who's still sitting in the back, visibly tense. He addresses the room again, his tone firm but not accusatory. Darrell, I'm not here to single anyone out, but we need to have an honest conversation. What happened today, how I was treated, it's a direct reflection of the assumptions we make about others. He shifts his gaze, making sure to catch everyone's eyes as he speaks. Darrell, continuing. It's easy to judge someone based on their appearance, on their clothes, their style, the way they present themselves. But that's a problem. We all have biases, whether we want to admit it or not. And today, I was the target of that bias. The employees look at each other, some shifting uncomfortably, others processing the truth in Darrell's words. One of the younger sales associates, a man in his 20s, hesitates but raises his hand. Darrell nods in his direction. Young sales associate, hesitantly. I think most of us try to treat customers fairly, but sometimes it's hard not to make assumptions, especially when you're so used to the type of customers we normally get. Darrell nods thoughtfully, acknowledging the truth in the young man's words. Darrell, nodding. I get that, I do. We all have biases. It's human nature. He pauses for a moment, letting the room process. He doesn't want to shame anyone. He wants to create an environment where people feel comfortable owning their mistakes and moving forward. Darrell, continuing. But here's the thing. It's not enough to just try to be fair. We have to actively challenge those biases. We have to create an environment where everyone feels respected, no matter what they look like, no matter where they come from, no matter how much money they make. He looks directly at Susan now, who finally meets his gaze, her face flushed with shame. The moment is heavy. Everyone in the room can feel the weight of it. Darrell, softly but firmly. And Susan, I need to ask you, if I hadn't been the owner, if I had been anyone else, would you have treated me the same? Would you have given me the same respect you'd give someone who walked in here wearing a suit and tie? The room goes quiet as Susan opens her mouth, but no words come out. She's trapped by her own actions, unable to respond in the face of such a direct question. The silence is deafening. It's one thing to apologize. It's another to be asked to face the truth of your actions. Susan now understands the weight of what's happened. The apology was the easy part, but this is the hard part. Facing the question of whether she would have treated him differently, had he looked like someone more appropriate for this dealership. And the truth stings. Finally, Susan's shoulders slump, her voice shaky as she speaks up. Susan, softly, I made a mistake. I misjudged you. And for that, I'm truly sorry. Darrell nods, his expression unreadable for a moment. He takes a deep breath, then looks at the group as a whole, his tone softening, but still firm. Darrell, thank you for saying that, Susan. He turns his gaze across the room, meeting the eyes of everyone present. Darrell, continuing. This isn't just about me. It's about every customer who walks through those doors, every customer who doesn't fit into someone's preconceived notion of what a luxury car buyer looks like. Every person who's been judged by their appearance before they even get a chance to show what they can do or what they're capable of. The employees, some of them nodding, others quietly reflecting. Listen as Darrell speaks with authority, but also with understanding. This isn't just a lecture, it's a call to action. Darrell, nodding. Moving forward, we're going to do better. I'm implementing new training programs to help everyone understand the importance of inclusivity and respect. We need to make sure this dealership is a place where everyone, regardless of who they are or how they look, feels welcome and valued. The camera captures the quiet nods from the employees, some still processing the depth of the conversation, but all understanding that change is coming. Darrell's words carry weight, and they're not just talking about cars anymore. Darrell, final words. Change doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with accountability, and we're going to lead by example. We're not just selling cars here, we're building trust. We're creating relationships. We're representing a standard of excellence. The staff's energy shifts in the room, a new sense of determination spreading. The tension that once hung heavy now begins to lift. Even Susan, though still uncomfortable, seems to understand the depth of what Darrell is saying. She nods slowly, her resolve firming up. Darrell smiling faintly. So, let's get to work, and let's make sure we treat people the way they deserve to be treated from the first moment they walk through the door. The employees begin to nod, murmurs of agreement starting to ripple through the room. Susan sits quietly, her shoulders no longer tense, but her gaze fixed forward, determined to move forward and make things right. The camera slowly zooms in on Darrell as he stands at the front of the conference room, his posture calm but authoritative. The employees are more at ease now, the tension from earlier replaced with a collective sense of anticipation. The room is still, each person waiting to hear the next steps. Darrell surveys the group, his gaze steady. After confronting the bias that has been quietly shaping the dealership's culture, Darrell is ready to take the next step. Change isn't just about words, it's about action. And today, Darrell's going to show exactly how he plans to lead by example, ensuring that respect and inclusivity become the foundation of this dealership. Darrell clears his throat, bringing everyone's attention back to him. Darrell, speaking firmly, "Thank you all for your openness so far. It's not easy to hear the truth, but it's necessary. And now, it's time to move forward. It's time to turn what we've discussed into real action." He pauses, his voice gaining strength as he continues. "Darrell, starting next week, we will be implementing a new training program for everyone at this dealership. These programs will focus on recognizing and addressing unconscious biases, because it's clear that we all have them. And we're going to work to challenge those biases, to make sure every customer who walks through our doors feels valued, no matter who they are or how they look." There's a murmur of acknowledgement in the room as employees exchange glances. They're listening now, some with a sense of relief, others with quiet determination. Darrell's words resonate. They know change is coming, and they know it's needed. Darrell's approach isn't just about changing behavior. It's about creating an environment where respect is the baseline expectation. He's laying the groundwork for a culture that's inclusive, welcoming, and fair. The road ahead will be challenging, but the path to transformation is clear. Darrell continues, his tone unwavering. "Darrell, this training will be mandatory for all employees, from the front desk to the sales floor. I'm not leaving anyone out. Everyone will have the chance to reflect on their actions and learn how to create a better experience for every customer who comes in." His eyes scan the room, making sure the gravity of his words is felt. Employees nod in agreement, some looking more thoughtful than before. Susan, seated near the back, looks up, her expression shifting from uncertainty to resolve. She's ready to make things right. Darrell, continuing. "The training will also include workshops on effective communication, conflict resolution, and customer relations. It's not just about recognizing bias. It's about building the skills to interact with respect, understanding, and empathy." He lets that thought settle for a moment, allowing the group to process it. The room is quiet, but there's a sense of anticipation in the air. Narrator, VO, Darrell's message is clear. This isn't just a one-time conversation. This is a shift that will touch every aspect of the dealership. And it's not something that will be solved overnight. But with a clear plan in place, Darrell is setting the stage for a lasting change. Darrell steps forward slightly, his voice gaining more emphasis. "Darrell, we're also going to focus on performance reviews that go beyond just sales numbers. I want to know how you're treating our customers, how you're contributing to this new culture. Every single one of you is responsible for making this dealership a place where people feel respected and valued." The camera cuts to a few employees, their expressions thoughtful as they process Darrell's words. There's a shared understanding now. This is more than just about the cars. It's about changing the culture at the heart of Prestige Motors. Darrell, pausing for a moment, his tone soft but firm. "This is a team effort. We're in this together, and it's my job to support you in making these changes. If any of you need help along the way, whether it's additional training, feedback, or just someone to talk to, my door is always open. The employees exchange looks, some of them visibly more relaxed. They can see that Darrell isn't just giving orders, he's offering his full support, and that makes all the difference. Narrator VO. Darrell's leadership isn't about top-down orders, it's about empowering his team. He's creating a space where growth is encouraged and where every employee is supported in their journey to better themselves. With this kind of leadership, the shift in culture feels possible. Darrell steps back, allowing his words to resonate. Then he addresses the group with a final statement that carries the full weight of the conversation. Darrell, firmly. But here's the thing. Actions speak louder than words. The training programs, the feedback sessions, the new policies, they're all just the beginning. What really matters is what we do from here on out. It's what you do every day, in every interaction with our customers, with each other, and with the community. That's where the real change will happen. The room falls silent as his words sink in. The camera zooms in on a few of the employees, who now appear more resolved, more focused. There's a new sense of purpose in the room, Darrell smiling faintly. So, let's get to work. Let's make sure every person who walks through these doors knows that they are valued for who they are, not for how they look or what they have. The employees, once hesitant, now seem more confident. There's a palpable shift in the energy, a sense of unity beginning to form. Some employees nod in agreement, while others exchange quiet glances, a sense of relief spreading through the group. It's clear that this isn't just a momentary change. It's the beginning of a transformation. Darrell has set the course, and now it's up to everyone at Prestige Motors to follow through. The road ahead will be difficult, but with clarity, commitment, and support, they are ready to face whatever comes next. The camera lingers on Darrell, standing tall at the front of the room, before slowly pulling back to reveal the entire group, united, ready for the work that lies ahead. The camera opens on Darrell standing in the showroom, a quiet moment of reflection. The sunlight streams through the windows, casting long shadows on the sleek cars below. Darrell's gaze sweeps across the room, his mind clearly on the road ahead. The energy in the dealership has shifted. The employees are now engaged, hopeful, and more united than before. As the day draws to a close, Darrell stands in the showroom, looking around at the place he's determined to change. The challenges ahead are clear, but so is the path to a better future. This isn't just about changing the way customers are treated, it's about changing the culture from the inside out. And Darrell knows that leading by example will be the key to making it happen. The camera lingers on Darrell's face, his expression calm yet resolute. Darrell, reflecting to himself, I know there will be bumps along the way. Change is never easy, and breaking old habits can be tough. But I believe in this team. I believe in this dealership. And I believe that, together, we can create something truly special here. The camera cuts to a shot of Susan, standing near the back of the showroom. She's watching Darrell from a distance, her expression thoughtful. Darrell notices her, and with a gentle smile, he approaches her. The weight of their earlier conversation still lingers, but there's a sense of understanding between them now. Darrell, softly, Susan, I just wanted to say, I appreciate your apology, and I believe in second chances. Susan looks up, her face softened by his words. She takes a small step forward, a quiet sense of relief crossing her face. Susan, sincerely, thank you, Darrell. I won't let you down. I'm ready to do better. Darrell nods, his gaze steady, but his smile warm. Darrell, smiling slightly. I know you will. Let's make sure we all do better, together. The camera follows Darrell as he walks back toward the showroom floor, the employees now moving with a renewed sense of purpose. The air feels lighter, the weight of judgment and assumption beginning to lift. The road ahead will undoubtedly have its challenges, but with Darrell's leadership and the team's commitment, Prestige Motors is on its way to becoming a place where judgment is based on character, not appearance. The foundation has been laid, and now the real work begins. The camera pulls back to reveal the showroom once more, this time with a sense of hope in the air. The cars gleam under the lights, but the true transformation is happening beyond the polished surfaces, inside the hearts and minds of the people who work here. It's a new beginning for Prestige Motors, and under Darrell's leadership, it will be a dealership that leads by example, where respect, fairness, and inclusivity are the true luxury. The camera fades out, the sound of footsteps echoing softly in the showroom as Darrell looks out toward the future.